listen to Professor ChrisLlewellyn speaking about the construction phase. So that will be really interesting to see. So Professor ChrisLlewellyn also is also well known from the community, having been CERN Directors-General from 94 to 98, and as well SESAME Council President, so the second one, so after Professor Schopper, and he's at the ITER as well, chairman of the council, and together with his assignment as well as Director of Energy Research at Oxford University. So Professor ChrisLlewellyn.
Thank you, Christine. I'd like to start by congratulating you, Herman, on your birthday and wishing you and Renee a continued long, enjoyable life in good health. And thank you for your key role in promoting synchrotron radiation in general and SESAME in particular. I got to know Herman in 2006 to 7 when I first became directly involved in SESAME. And in the 10 years I was president of council, I met Herman frequently as a regular participant in council meetings, a member of the Beamlines, and later the Scientific Advisory Committee, where his contributions were greatly appreciated. Now, as Eliezer has, in his eloquent words, reminded us, there have been many points where the future of SESAME was in doubt, and even you could have said rational people would have given up. And Eliezer once said to me that if SESAME failed, it would be an orphan, but if it succeeded, it would have many fathers. Luckily, we're in the latter position. Herman is undoubtedly one of those fathers, and without his contribution, together with Gus Voss, SESAME as we know it would not exist. I should say there's one, as Eliezer also said, many people whose names you don't know have contributed, but I think there's a body that should be mentioned, which is UNESCO. It played a really key role in getting SESAME going. And maybe we could, since we've only mentioned fathers, we could say that that's a mother of SESAME. And certainly Clarissa there is one of the mothers, the mother of SESAME, together with UNESCO, if it's a feminine body. Now, in 2006 to 7, when I was being pressed to take over from Heuer as president of the council, I was persuaded by meeting the young people who were building SESAME, for whom SESAME had arranged training opportunities, and they'd returned to the region to build SESAME. And I was deeply impressed by their enthusiasm and felt I had to do what I could to help them. And I was also impressed by a remark of Eliezer's, which helped persuade me, who said, and I quote, "As a string theorist, I work in parallel universes. I was always curious about what a parallel universe was like, and now I know. I'm living in one when I go to SESAME meetings, working hand in hand with our neighbors on a common goal, bringing advanced knowledge to our region." Now, when I became president, following the opening of the building in November 2008, we had a nice building, but it was completely empty. There was a design for a machine, but we had no money to build it. Now, in 2002, as we've heard, the original idea of rebuilding and upgrading BESI was abandoned in favor of building a completely new 2.5 GeV main storage ring with straight sections which would allow insertions and make it a third generation device. That was an excellent idea scientifically. The original idea of just rebuilding BESI was a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing because the members would not have joined if they'd been faced with a very large amount of money needed to build SESAME. They simply wouldn't have come if they'd been told, you're going to have to contribute this money. But it was a curse because the funds for constructing the machine were not available. In 2009, we reevaluated the full cost of building SESAME and made, in the light of making a long-term plan, turned out to be a lot larger than previously thought. And it became very clear that the funds that were needed could not come, was unreasonable, $30 million or so, could not come from any one body. And secondly, that no one body would give it unless they knew that others would join them. Not going to say, I'll give you half if the other half wasn't going to be there. And we needed to get further commitments from the members. It was clear that we needed to plan for success and give the impression that the funds would be there and SESAME would be built in order to get it rolling. And we did that by making a strategic plan which was followed, albeit not exactly with the timetable, but it was followed in all details, and started to produce every year 3-year budget plans. We also accepted any in-kind donations that were on offer to make the books look good. For example, Samar Hasnain arranged a donation of old equipment from Daresbury Lab, which he told us was worth £20 million. So we've got £20 million on the books. In fact, almost nothing was used and it was essentially valueless. And that also was a curse, because when I asked the British Prime Minister a few years later, Gordon Brown, for funds for SESAME, he went and consulted people and came back saying, we've already given you 20 million. Furthermore, it transpired that Samar had given this equipment on his own initiative and he had never got authorization to do so, and he got into a lot of trouble. We hoped for a funding breakthrough in 2009, when some of you will remember Obama made his famous new opening speech in Cairo, talking about fostering centers of scientific excellence in the Muslim world. And we went to Washington, discussed it, but nothing came of it. And so far, to our disappointment, the US government has not put significant funds. The breakthrough came in 2012, when Eliezer prompted the Israeli government to say that they would provide $5 million, as well as their annual contributions, $5 million for construction, provided 4 other SESAME members did the same. So we invited all interested members to a meeting, which took place in a snowy evening in the basement of a hotel in Amman. Israel showed up, and we were looking for 4 others, but only 3 others came. Those were Iran, Jordan, and Turkey. Until just before the meeting, we expected Egypt to come, represented by the science minister, who was Hani Halal, who'd been the first administrative director of SESAME. But in the turmoil of the Arab Spring, Hani had been replaced as minister between setting up the meeting and when it happened. So we didn't have enough members, but nevertheless, they each agreed to make 5 million contributions on the understanding and hope that they'd be joined by Egypt later, which alas, never happened. However, as a result of the sanctions, Iran has not so far been able to transmit the funds and indeed pay its regular contributions. And that continues to be a very, very serious problem for SESAME, that it's missing one of the major annual contributions. This demonstration of commitment by the SESAME members encouraged the European Commission to decide in 2013 to provide 5 million euros for procurement of the components of the magnetic system of the main storage ring, provided it was built in collaboration with CERN, which was obviously a condition which we greatly welcomed. Who would turn down the offer of having the expert help of CERN? Credit for the European Commission's contribution goes to the then Commissioner, Carlos Moedas, and the then Portuguese Minister of Science, the late Mariano Gago, a high-energy physicist, who helped persuade Moedas that the Commission should give this money. The members' commitment also encouraged Italy to provide €1 million in 2014, which was used to procure accelerated cavities. So we were getting moving. And this was followed by further contributions from Italy, which during my mandate amounted to over €3 million, of which the last part was used to build a hostel for SESAME users. These funds, together with the donations of equipment from the members' annual contributions, which covered staff costs, power, and consumables, have proved sufficient to bring SESAME into operation, albeit in the first year with only 3 of the planned 7 big ones, and minimal supporting infrastructure, and despite difficulties. The difficulties were not just financial. There was a physical catastrophe in December 2013 when there was an unprecedented snowfall. It even snowed in Cairo for the first time for over 100 years, and the roof collapsed. So people were then saying, we have now open SESAME, because SESAME was operating under an open sky. But in those conditions, nevertheless, and this maybe was SESAME's finest hour, the booster was brought into operation then as the highest energy accelerator in the Middle East. In January 2017, a beam was transferred into the main storage ring for the first time. And a lot of credit for that goes to Erhard Hüttel, who led the construction, having taken over from Arman Nagy as technical director in early 2013. By the way, SESAME owes a lot to Armo, who is still today contributing to SESAME as chairman of the Machine Advisory Committee. I developed a great respect for Erhard, but did not always see eye to eye with him, as some of you who are there will remember. He's a very careful person, and he was unwilling to announce this is what we're going to do, this is the timetable, until the money was already in the bank. But I argued that we've got to show confidence and say what we're going to do, or we won't get the money in the bank. And somehow, despite this tension, we got through and got the machine built. By late February 2017, a beam had been stored and accelerated to over 2 GeV, and SESAME was opened by the King of Jordan in May of 2017, after which I handed over as president to Rolf Heuer. 2 final remarks. SESAME has 2 aims, as we've heard. The first is to enable good scientists from across the region to do good research and foster science and technology. This is happening, although the outlook is not entirely rosy because of the perennial lack of funds. They are desperately needed to build more supporting infrastructure, install the 4 more beam lines that are under construction, and hire the staff needed to operate them. In fact, SESAME is only able to operate because it has its own solar power plant. The European Commission had asked me, or asked us, what do you need to make SESAME sustainable? And we replied, a solar power plant. And at that point, Khaled Toukan in 2016 persuaded the Jordanian government to pass on funds provided by the EU to support deployment of clean energy in neighboring countries, to hand over these funds to SESAME to build a solar power plant under an agreement that was negotiated by Khaled and Yasser Halil, who, as another person who deserves tremendous credit, he did a terrific job as the Director of Administration throughout the period that I was the President and Council. The solar power plant has so far saved SESAME $9 million. Now, to those of you from countries with serious science budgets or big labs, that will sound like peanuts. $2 million is 2 years operating budget of SESAME. It would not be operating without the solar power plant. The second aim is to bring together diverse people from across the region, and this is always happening, already happening, and it goes on happening. The major difficulties have been and are financial, not political. There has been political tension. I mentioned the Arab Spring. There was tension in the meeting where we had at ministerial level when we agreed the 5 million contributions, and the effect of sanctions has had an effect. But while the atmosphere has been tense at the political level, at the working level, it's been very good, except for on a handful of occasions when there was very high political temperature in the region. And there have been some delicate issues, such as reaching agreement that Palestine, which joined SESAME as the Palestinian Authority, should be called Palestine. And on a couple of occasions, the appointments of vice presidents proved politically tricky, but the problems were very deftly handled by Maciek Nalic, representing UNESCO, and Clarissa, and probably most of you, even if you were in the meetings, were not even aware of these difficulties. In conclusion, SESAME is fulfilling its founders' dreams of fostering good science and regional collaborations. I hope that SESAME's success in keeping open the lines of communication across some of the deepest political divides in the world will serve as an example to those trying to keep an encouragement to those trying to keep communications open with Russian scientists, despite the events in Ukraine. And I also hope that SESAME's so far unique, pioneering example as the only accelerator lab in the world powered entirely by renewable energy will be followed by others, including eventually CERN. Herman, I think that you and the other fathers and mothers of Sesame can be very proud of your progeny. Long live Sesame. Thank you.